What's going on, mi gente? We're just a couple of days away from the World Cup qualifier starting, and we're here to break down every single nation in the conmebol region, so stay tuned. What's going on, mi gente? I'm here joined by Roberto Rojas from DAZN to talk about Paraguay. We got the World Cup qualifiers starting in less than a week, and it's very important. So let's get right into it. Thank you, Roberto, for your time. How you doing today?
My pleasure, Diego. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, absolutely excited. I got the Albirroja shirt on. In about 6 days from now. We get it all started again. Another World qualifying process. I spoke to my friends about this, and it feels like we just got off the World Cup that we saw in Qatar, and now we're going straight back into it in a different one because, of course, there's 16 new teams that are going to be in this next World Cup. In conmebol, there's 2 more extra spots, which means it's more of an obligation for teams to make it. And what better way for us and for you guys, of course, to kick it off right there in Ciudad del Este as Paraguay take on Peru. I'm excited, man. I really am.
It is crazy. It is crazy because, like you said, we literally just got out of one World Cup. We're going right back into it. And you already mentioned the 2 extra spots that we got now in conmebol. How do you feel about that?
You know, everyone has an opinion about the World Cup. And, again, this has been something that's been going on since the creation. I mean, remember, the first World Cup had, 12 teams, and then we went to 16, then 24, 32. Now we're at 48. It's only increasing. Remember, it's a World Cup. It should be for every country. That being said, you have to wait and see how this one's going to be, because I think even, I don't want to use a big example, but look at the Women's World Cup, for example, that we just had when we went from 24 to 32. Women's football has increased tremendously, and you saw some upsets. You saw some teams that never been to a World Cup or have never gone far in a World Cup do tremendously well. We have a new champion, Spain, of course. They've never went to a final, and they go on and win it. England, of course, went far. Other teams as well. So I'm curious to see if the same will go like in the men's side. I think we did see kind of that in Qatar, with Morocco finishing all the way in 4th place. No one expected them to go that far. So yeah, I mean, I think it opens the doors for many of these teams. And I think in conmebol, I think it kind of takes away as well that kind of feeling of it being the hardest World Cup qualifying process, because I think, everyone was so really focused on how South America has just been so competitive because of the quality, but they can only bring 4.5 teams. Now it's 6.5 teams, and you're just like, okay, they're bringing 60% of conmebol to the World Cup. It's not like as funny, but no, it's going to be just as competitive. And I fear for the 4 teams, well, 3.5 if they make the World Cup. I fear for those teams who don't make it. It almost seems as if, though, they will feel even more disappointed than in previous tournaments because of the fact that now there's these open spaces. So bigger obligation for a lot of these teams, but also a bigger risk of disappointment that if they don't make it, it's almost as if, though, they've kind of failed really hard than they have in past qualifying process.
That's a great way to look at it, because I had looked at it the first way you mentioned, how, it took away from that competitive side. But I never thought about the disappointment it would bring the other 3 teams, I guess. Now, Paraguay, they finished 8th in the last qualifying session. 3 wins, 7 draws, and 8 losses, if I remember correctly. What needs to change now?
Well, I think what needs to change is to win. I mean, certainly trying to bring back the mystique, for a team that went to 4 straight World Cups from 98 to 2010 to miss now 3 straight. It's almost an embarrassment for at least a generation that grew up seeing that team go to the World Cups and do well. And, we've kind of felt like we wasted a generation of players who have been playing so well for their clubs that when they put on the national team shirt, you don't see it. I mean, there's been issues going on for the last decade or so where we never really found our identity. And I think, here we are literally in their 4th attempt, literally, to try to make it to a World Cup ever since we missed the last went to one in 2010. I think this, again, like you said, with these increased spots, with this kind of notion of, our players starting to really gel into a side of talented individuals. The one big issue that I think I have, and I think a lot of Paraguayans will tell you, is that, we have a team that just isn't performing to the way that we want it to be. I mean, I think that's been kind of been said, and we'll get into some of the players in a bit, but you have players who are performing at fantastic levels at club level, be it in Europe or in South America or even MLS. I mean, there's been players who performed on that end, and just when they put on their national team shirt, it just completely feels overwhelmed. Of course, there's been a lot of inconsistency with coaches. I mean, we've gone through so many different coaches Now we're sticking with one in Guillermo Esqueloto. So we just have to wait and see. This is his first attempt at a real process, because by the time he had come through, Paraguay were essentially out. I mean, yeah, they had a chance perhaps if they had won a few games, but with the way that they've been performing, it wasn't really going to happen. So now we get a fresh slate. And I think this is something that is going to really be big on them, because I think, like you said, there is that level of pressure now for these teams. And I think for Paraguay's case, in a country that's always been kind of demanding of their players, it's always been done. And like you said, like I said, like growing up in a generation that have seen them go to World Cups and seen players who have played at the highest level do well, that's that responsibility being placed to them. So no, I think firstly, just try to win, and better, and the best way to do it is doing it at home. They're trying something new, as I pointed out. They're not playing at the Defensores del Chaco this time. They're not even playing Asunción in the capital. They're going all the way, let's say east, basically. I'm trying to think of my Paraguayan geography. They're going east to Ciudad del Este, where they only played one game in a qualifier, and that was against Ecuador. They'd already been out, but I guess the FA thought that they wanted something new. They wanted to give some opportunities to fans who have traveled to Ciudad del Este from Amsterdam. It's a really long trip. It's like 6-7 hours on car. So a new opportunity for fans who have never been able to go and see Paraguay at the Defensor del Chaco or even Asunción. Now you get this chance in Ciudad del Este. And then, of course, it brings a different kind of atmosphere. And I'm curious to see how it goes. And I mean, if it goes well, then great. Then it really kicks off onto the right path. But if it doesn't go well, then there's going to be a lot of pressure on these players, the FA, and of course the coach Guillermo Esqueloto, if they're not able to pick up maximum points against Peru in this game on Thursday.
Speaking of the coach Guillermo Esqueloto, how do you feel about him and what he's shown so far with La Albirroja?
I think it's something sort of, a similar path to what we've been seeing in kind of this whole process of Paraguay for quite some time. Inconsistent, because you're looking at a team that really is trying to find its identity. And I think when you look at some of the issues that have been going on, for example, I'm seeing a Paraguay side who have always been good on set pieces, but they concede goals on set pieces. You see that in the qualifier. I've seen it in the qualifiers. I've seen it in friendlies. It just feels like this is something that shouldn't happen. And I think, for a team that has always been so kind of resistant on defense, they've always produced really good defenders. They've also dealt with bad giveaways and bad defending. And I think that's something that's also been an issue. The goal scoring as well has been kind of really something that, we don't have a true team. We don't have even a true number 9, like some teams have in other countries. So you have that issue. And I think the general consensus on Guillermo Esqueloto is really what needs to be done. What kind of identity? Of course, they got to win against, a Nicaragua side that they should have beaten on the day, but they only scored twice in the last 30 minutes. So it's almost as if, though, it wasn't enough even to convince them. But I mean, they've dealt with some good games recently. I mean, they barely lost to Chile. I mean, they beat teams like the UAE and Mexico. Okay, yeah, I was at that game in Atlanta, and it came from a bad defensive mistake from Mexico, and then a full-on park the bus for the entire rest of the game. And so it's like, what do you expect from them? What type of team that we have? And I think that's going to be the main issue that I think is going to be dealt with, hopefully, in these next few games, not just against Peru, but overall for the next remainder of the year. Because you look at the schedule that Paraguay has: Peru at home, Venezuela away, then all the way to Argentina, then Bolivia, then Chile, then Colombia. Those are tough teams. Those are really tough teams. And I think ultimately it's the issue that I think I have is just, trying to find an identity that works, which allows these players to really flourish in their best ability, and also trying to stay with that lineup, because you have some players who perhaps can do so well in one game, but then they fall cold in the next game. And so it's kind of that. It's like too much chopping and changing. I think they've, correct me if I'm going to actually just try to remember here, but in the last process, in like the 18 games, they used over 50 players or something like that. Yeah. That's not normal. If you're going to make a World Cup, you're not going to have to use 50 players. You're going to have to stay consistent and under that number. So I think that's kind of what I am really fearful for Guillermo Esqueloto. I'm going to give him a clean slate this time because, again, it's his first ever process as in the entire process. We have to wait and see if he stays on that process, because you know how it is in South America with teams feeling a bit tedious and very much impatient towards their managers that if it doesn't go well, they're going to chop and change all the time. So we'll wait and see. But I think I personally would give him a clean slate for now. But it's going to take a lot of convincing for me to see the best Paraguay team possible.
It's very funny that you kind of mentioned the identity, right? Because I remember growing up, and my father or anyone around me in that time would say Paraguay defensively, they're really strong, and don't ever give them a set because they'll probably score. And now that you mention all that, it's kind of funny because now I was looking at the stats earlier before obviously talking to you, and they got scored on almost double what they were scoring during the last World Cup campaign. So you're absolutely right. With the names that they have now, obviously you got to see Miguel Almirón as being the star of the group, right? You have Enciso, which I know he's not going to be here because of injury, unfortunately. But who else is there that can support those type of players right now?
Well, one player that has kind of really been under the radar, and he's not been playing a lot of games actually for Paraguay, but usually when he does, he's gotten a lot of attention and usually has been, I think he got the 2 assists in the last game against Nicaragua. But that's Cacu Romero, Alejandro Cacu Romero Gamarra, who used to play in New York for the Red Bulls, used to play in Saudi Arabia. Now he's at UAE. I think in the 15 games that he's played, he's had 5 assists and 5 goals. I mean, that's an incredible return for a team that, typically doesn't produce players of that kind of, inconsistent level. So he's someone that I think Peru will have to really look out for, someone that could play as, a number 10 or even on the wing. He could be someone that could be there in an instant and really step it out. I think he's someone that I think is going to be the key factor among other players, like you said, like Almirón, someone that I think is going to be amongst a lot of pressure, especially considering that he's on a Newcastle side that just made the Champions League. He had a good season last season, scoring all those goals. And, we really didn't see the best of Almirón so far in a Paraguay shirt. I think that's always something that's kind of been the big question mark towards him is, and similar players like Gustavo Gomez, who's probably one of the best Palmeira players ever at this point, especially if they win another Libertadores. But you got someone that is widely renowned in Brazil and in Palmeira's history, but on a Paraguay shirt, even as the captain, he's hugely criticized. He's hugely getting a bunch of criticism from ex-players, from fans, pundits, everyone. And, and this is someone that he's going to be the captain, of course, for this process because the players like him, Guillermo Barros likes him. And so he's going to stay put on this one. And, again, it's all about just trying to find the right identity, and other players like, someone like Diego Gomez, who's starting to find his form in Inter Miami, Matias Rojas, ex-Racing, he's at Corinthians now, starting to really make his name for himself there. But you have other players out there that are starting to really pull into something of an identity. The one name that I think also as well that I forgot to mention, and someone that, I'm sure you've grown up with seeing the good goalkeepers as well, but we've also used goalkeepers that are notoriously very old. In comes a new player, Carlos Coronel, the Red Bulls goalkeeper. I had the fortune of seeing him the other week when they took on Inter Miami. Diego Gomez scored against him, but he is going to be likely the number one, the first, one of the first, if not very few Brazilian-born naturalized Paraguayans. We've always been used to naturalized Uruguayans or Argentines. Now we got a Brazilian. Thanks to his mother, he is Paraguayan. He got the nationality a couple months ago, so he could play in these qualifiers, and so he's destined to get the number 1 spot next Thursday. So I think it's just that, like, some of those players that I mentioned are going to have to step it up, and we'll have to wait and see who's going to be fit in time for the starting lineups and like kind of information getting leaked. But I mean, off the top of my head, if I have to choose, like, just the way that the team would play, I think you have Coronel in goal. I think you're going to go for a back 4 of Roberto Rojas, no relation, of course, and right there in the right back, the center back pairing of Gomez and Balbuena of Dinamo Moscow. You have the left back Blas Riveros, who was playing a lot in Europe, but now he's back in Argentina. He's going to be playing over there in Talleres. You got your midfield 3, which possibly is going to be Matias Villasanti of Gremio, Andres Cubas, who's playing at the Vancouver Whitecaps, and possibly as well even one of Diego Gomez or Richard Ortiz, who's had a fantastic year so far in Olimpia, or Cacu Romero, like I said. And then your front 3, it could be the likes of Almiron over there and at the right wing, someone maybe as like Ramon Sosa, who's had a fantastic year so far at Talleres. Talleres side has been competing so far. And then the main one is really the question mark is the number 9. You know, there's been a lot of chopping and changing towards finding a real number 9. We have tested so many different number 9s in the past, God knows how many years. We've had Sanabria, and he's not in the squad at the moment. But now it looks like it's going to be Gabriel Avalos of Argentinos Juniors. He's the one that's kind of in form at the moment so far. So he might be the one getting the starting 11. But again, it's still a big question mark because, as I mentioned, you don't know what your best lineup is. And I think that's always been the issue in comparison to other teams who have always had like a set lineup or maybe a couple of changes here and there. But for Paraguay, it feels like you don't know what's the best squad. But this is just in my head, just thinking if I was Guillermo Barcelona and what really would go forward. So I think if the game was tomorrow, I think that would be your starting 11 against Peru and Ciudad del Este.
I think that's very solid, though. I mean, when you mention those names, those are names that, you know, you could worry. You could worry. Our Peru side could worry about them. Now, thinking ahead, right? It's 2026. It's World Cup year. Where do you realistically see this Paraguay side in the standings of CONMEBOL?
You know, I don't like to feel optimistic nor pessimistic. I like to find the middle ground. I think when you look at really all of the places that now Paraguay have had, and also looking at some of the players in comparison to all the other teams, I mean, yeah, you're going to have your Brazils and Argentinas and Uruguays. They're going to be there. Yeah. No doubt about it. I'll make those predictions here and there. Well, there's 3 more spots open for automatic spots. I mean, you have places like, you have teams like Colombia, you have teams like Chile, you have teams like Peru, Ecuador, even Venezuela. You know, they're in the mix. Let's see what Bolivia can do. They're always in there. But Paraguay, they aspire to go into those top spots. Listen, Diego, if I sat here right now in 2023 and you told me that Paraguay would qualify on the final day in the last minute, scoring a goal to go in 6th place, I will sign my contract and resign my job and take it. Yes, that is where I'm at the moment, because I think, like I said beforehand, when you're a country that's been to so many World Cups in the past and have also been so consistently good at it as well, people want to go back. And I am selfish as well. It's Paraguay's playing in the United States, so why wouldn't I want to go? But realistically, I think Paraguay, and speaking to people as well who have made like their predictions and like group chats and whatnot, I think if we aspire to go in 5th, 6th place, I think that would be a remarkable achievement. Like, it would be something that would be good for us. We don't really want to go sweat it out in the playoffs because, of course, you have teams from Africa, from North America, from Asia. You know, they're the ones that want to go into. I forgot how the whole process works, but it's a weird thing, and you don't want that kind of more sufferness in comparison to Paraguay fans have already dealt with a lot of just really inconsistent performances. I think if they can settle for 5th or 6th place, in my opinion, I'll take it, honestly. But even realistically saying, I think we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I think, you know, if I were to make a prediction right now on September 1st, before the start of the qualifiers, I'd say Paraguay finishes 6th and qualifies for the first World Cup since 2010.
I mean, that's not bad at all.
I'll take it. I'll take it. Literally,
yeah.
if someone told me 6th place, go, done. I'll take it. I don't
care about the rest. Just sign.
Go. Let me just go in.
Are there any teams that you could say right now that you feel confident that will not make it?
It's tough. I mean, someone was really tempting me to pick Bolivia, make the world to be a surprise pack. I'm just like, no, their team is just not good.
They just don't know how to do it away from home, I feel.
That's the thing. Yeah, man. Like, literally. And mind you, it's 6 places, so you're gonna have to pick up points really from there. And you, in theory as well, like, even if you do start badly, you still have a chance. But then again, you have other teams that are gonna try to go up the pecking order to go far. So yeah, I think Bolivia's out. I think Venezuela, look, I'm curious to see what they do, because again, they've never been to a World Cup. They have a good generation of players, but you fear as if though, are they good enough for the big occasion? That's always been my issue. I always feel like when they need to get the games that matter and try to go and win, they don't do it. And so I think I see them out as well. And so that leaves one more spot because of, again, let's assume the playoff spot goes to another team, and they qualify. So that leaves the likes of Evan, Ecuador, a Colombia, a Peru, and a Chile. I don't know. This is where I'm stuck because I don't want to be. I wouldn't want to be that 8th place team. Because if you're 7, you still have a chance. But if you're 8th place, it's just like ugh. And I can't answer for that, man. I really can't. I mean, gun to my head, I'm picking Chile. I think I'm picking Chile. I look at the team. It's like the generations on their last legs. You don't really have a lot of players coming up that are really impressing. I mean, yeah, you have Ben Barrington Diaz and whatnot, but that's really much it. And I don't see anyone else really trying to flourish. But again, this is a team that also has a lot of experience. They can fool you like that, similar to Peru. You got players as well on their last legs, but they also have still some players who are, either finishing off their prime and getting into the twilight of their careers or are still in it. So I think that's where my fear is. Whereas for Paraguay, we're in kind of that fear, in that kind of like Peru style, where we have some players who are immediately in their prime, is that if they don't make this World Cup, they're probably never going to make it again, as they become professional players, like they're in their 30s. And then you have a young generation of players like your Encisos, like your Enzo Gonzalez, who just joined Wolverhampton. He's not on the team, but like similar examples. You have other players as well who are very young, like under the age of 25. Those are the ones that are going to be part of that new generation. But for this generation of your Almirones, your Gomez's, Alonso, Valbuenas, so on and so forth, this is the World Cup qualifying process that they have to make it, because if they don't make it in this one, I don't see them having another chance in 2030.
That's very fair. That's very fair. And I think that 8th spot is kind of the hardest to predict for me as well, right? For me as well. It's up in the air. It's literally going to be just by probably 1 point, like it was in the last campaign. And that's what makes CONMEBOL, to me, the best World Cup qualifying campaign in the world. I want to thank you for your time, Roberto. Again, it's always great to talk to you. It's always an insight into La Albirroja and what's coming for them. So I want to give you this last minute to let the people know where they can find you, what you're up to, or your work.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, of course, good luck on Thursday. Of course, this game is obviously meaningful for us, but as a Paraguayan, I want to win. I'm sure you want to win as a Peruvian, but of course, may the best result happen to whoever. But thank you again. You could obviously follow me at Roberto Rojas 97 on Twitter. That's where I really talk about anything and everything. You could also check out my 2 podcasts, Little Bit Football. We actually are just celebrating our 10th-year anniversary in about a couple of days. Yeah, it's crazy. Podcasting for 10 years. Who knew? So we're going to celebrate that in a couple of days, where basically we just talk about everything in the world of football. We've had you on, Diego, beforehand. So thank you again for helping us out. And of course, speaking into Paraguayan football, you can also check out Guarani Vision, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. We try to do a show every week where we talk about Paraguayan teams, Paraguayan players abroad. We just finished recording a preview episode for those 2 qualifying games between Peru and Venezuela. So be sure to check out Guarani Vision on YouTube and other podcast streaming services. So once again, thank you again for giving me this time. And yeah, bring on Thursday, man. I'm excited.
Here we go. You heard it here first, guys. Once again, this is Paraguay. We got the other World Cup, CONMEBOL World Cup nations for you. So stay tuned. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe. See you on the next one.